Well, hi folks, meteorologist Michael Wilhite here with WilhiteWX.com. Thanks for logging on here to my latest pattern update here. There's a lot to talk about tonight. Potential Ohio Valley winter storm coming up next week, and then we're talking about some major cold coming in. We're going to dive into all these tonight. But first, if you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel yet, please be sure to do that. Username here, WilhiteWX. Hit that subscribe button. I'll be doing more of these videos coming up. And just to let you know, I'm introducing some new things as well, especially for those of you in the ag industry. I forecast for southern Indiana weather. That's not going to be changing, but I am adding an ag weather side of my site as well. And so my website will eventually be changing from southernindianaweather.com to WilhiteWX.com. And I'll be running Wilhite Ag Weather and Southern Indiana Weather kind of off that one site there. So still focusing on Southern Indiana weather, but I'm adding ag weather to this as well, and I'll be focusing on the Midwest and the Plain states primarily. On that, offering a lot of cool things coming up, especially as we gear up towards the planting season. So be sure to check back for more of these videos and a lot of other cool things coming up. And again, click that subscribe button here on YouTube, and be sure to follow me on Twitter at WilhiteWX for a lot more information there. Now, let's start off with what we got going on here in the Ohio Valley. We've got a little bit of rain coming through tomorrow. It's not going to be a massive amount of rain. We're looking at, maybe a ½ inch of rain here. Unfortunately, it's just not going to be anything significant with this. We could certainly use a little bit of rain, but you see that quickly moves off, and by tomorrow afternoon, most of Indiana will be clear. It'll be moved over into Kentucky. Then there are hints that we get maybe some snow showers start to go into the area here on Monday. It's only going to be about a 20 or 30% chance here across southern Indiana and Kentucky. Nothing really significant. It'll just be a cool down with this second cold front that's moved through. The more significant thing that we're going to see is a little bit later on this week, whenever we've got a storm developing. And so this is for Thursday afternoon. We've got a deep trough sort of coming down into here. You've got a low developing on up into here. Rain starts to break out on Thursday, and then watch what the GFS I'm showing you here does, and it develops a pretty significant low, sort of tracks it right up the Ohio River, and as it does, you've got storm-induced cold being pulled in off of this strong low on the backside, and you get some snow then as a result of that. And then, by the way, this is actually eerily similar to what we saw back on the 11th and 12th when we had our winter storm. What we saw back then, if you remember right, was a low that sort of developed down in here and sort of tracked up like this. And so it made a nice little swath of snow across the area. And then if you'll remember right behind that, a couple of days later, we had a little clipper system that sort of came down like this. Well, look what this is doing. The low on this one, it starts to track down here and then sort of comes in a way like that rather than down here and like this. But it's a similar path. It's not the exact path, but it's a similar path. And then watch what behind it. Comes behind it another little clipper system that could dump a little bit of snow there as well. So, look, we're a week out. We're not going to be able to get specific on this, but certainly it illustrates for us that there's something to watch here, an active pattern to come. And then, by the way, as you go on out, you've got another storm here around the 5th that may dump some snow as well. So there's plenty to track in the coming days. Is there any good model agreement with this? We all know the GFS is about as reliable as Mexican tap water this far out, as I've said many times before. So is there any truth to this? Well, first off, let me just say that the GFS has actually been the most consistent of the model on a similar path. It's not been perfectly consistent by any means, but it has been much more consistent than what the GFS usually is, which is kind of scary. The Canadian, which was really the one that excelled during the last go-around we saw, struggling a little bit, but the idea is there. Here we go in towards the 1st, and you got some rain breaking out. Watch what it does with this low. It sees the low developing down here, but it's a 10-13 low. It's much weaker. And then watch what it does. It starts to try to close it off as it gets over into Kentucky. Does change us to a little bit of snow here as that low passes by, but it hangs some of the energy up in another low on the back, and that low ends up being sort of primary there. And that sort of hangs back enough that as this clipper system is rolling in here with it, it all becomes one sort of messy system before it pushes out. That's honestly a pretty weird solution, and I'm not sure I buy into that. But the idea that a storm is there and there could be a winter component is certainly there. Even the Euro is showing this as well, but the Euro has been the most inconsistent of them. Let me just say that. As we come into time here on Thursday, there's the rain breaking out across the area. It never really develops a strong low and moves it up. It just transitions this to snow on the backside of the system, and you see it primarily becomes more of a Kentucky event for us than it does anything. And then beyond that, as you go through it, it doesn't really do much justice. It doesn't really see this clipper system behind that. So the Euro has been the one, sadly enough, that has had the more run-to-run variability than the other two. So, you know, several days out from the system that we had on the 11th, we had reasonably good model agreement overall, and so we were able to forecast a little bit better. We've got some model agreement, but certainly not enough to be tremendously confident at this point. What I can say is something looks like it's there, and I do think there's probably a winter component to the system, but dialing in on exactly where is next to impossible at this point. The GFS, the afternoon run had this for us, which, you know, for Kentucky, this would be a pretty significant storm, and even for us in Indiana. But, you know, just to give you an idea, this was the morning run. And so you see just from one run down to the other, you've got a significant difference in that, in what you are seeing on that as well. And if let me I'm going over here and pulling something up that I have on my desktop over here. What I did prior to these runs this morning was looked at the last 10 runs at that time of what the GFS was, and it just kind of illustrates for you how all over the place this has been in its positioning of this. So all of them show snow. There's one run down here that showed very minor accumulations for Indiana and not that much for Kentucky either, but everything else has showed decent snow. So this far out, really, honestly, the only thing that you want to really look for right now is the idea that it is still there, because other than that, these snow maps aren't going to be incredibly useful. You can't dial this in and say, oh, looks like I'm going to get 5 inches of snow there around this area. No, this far out, these are completely unreliable. All we're looking for this far out is the idea. The Canadian has this idea as well, and you look at this and you say, oh, that's a lot of snow. It is. It always shows that at this far out. It'll dial those numbers back. It almost always does. We rarely ever get that much snow around here. One run prior to that, we saw this. And again, that's a significant shift in wear and higher in totals. You're going to see that. So just know for right now that the idea of some snow is certainly there, but throw in the Euro, and Indiana almost misses out, and it's only 2 or 3 inches down here for Kentucky. So all over the place on solutions. Could it be that we don't get any snow out of this? I think we're probably going to find some snow here in the lower Ohio Valley out of this. I really do. The question is going to be how much to me at this point. Is it going to be a significant winter storm, or is it going to be a pretty minor snow event? That's something that we still have to really dial in on. And by the way, this should start to get a little bit better for you as we go in time. As we get into next week, we'll start to see this energy sampled, and once that energy is sampled, we'll be able to get a better handle on this. What we're looking at here is energy in the upper levels of the atmosphere, and just to sort of show you, here's where our storm is right here. If you notice this big low that's spinning out in the ocean, the energy that's sort of right up in here is the energy that's going to cause this. Let me show you that. Watch this as it tracks through here. So you're starting to see this sort of spin around, and it shoots off a piece of that energy right here onto the coast of British Columbia. And notice that this is 0Z on Tuesday. That would actually be 7 p.m. Eastern time on Monday. So it's going to be Monday evening before that energy starts to roll on shore, and it's that energy that eventually is going to come down here and cause our storm, which is this little dip in the energy right here that's going to cause that low and track it up. So it's going to be Monday evening before we start to get this system decently sampled. The runs on Monday morning will probably have a partial sample. And so I think Monday morning's runs onward will be able to get a little bit better with this system. But unfortunately, it's going to be another couple, 3 days before we can start to get a little bit of more of an idea of what we can do fine-tuning on this. Now, beyond that, what I am more confident on is the cold. It's going to be some cold with this. As we just take a look here at our height anomalies, and what I'm showing you here is heights in the upper layers of the atmosphere, and just think about this as the colder collars being more of the cold weather, your troughs, your dips in the jet stream, and the warmer weathers. The warmer collars are your ridging, and so this is more of a ridge, warmer weather associated with it, milder weather. So here's that dip that comes through. First off here on Monday, and then you notice beyond that you've got another little dip in the jet stream that sort of comes down here for the first, and comes through, and then watch what comes behind this. We start to moderate out just a little bit behind that. The heights start to rise a little bit, but watch what's going on up in here. Winter's sort of reloading, and by the time you get into these purple colors up here, you're just getting into some freaking ridiculous cold. And watch what happens as this starts to rotate down. You get this lobe of the tropospheric polar vortex starting to come down a little bit further to the south here, and you're getting this massive trough start to form here in the west, and then it'll start to expand east. This is as far out as the model goes, but this will expand east with time. This is pretty much what we'd expect. This takes you out to the 5th of February here, and if we, this is what we call a negative EPO. And so if you take a look at what the EPO chart, and I showed this in my last video a couple of days ago, when it goes extreme into the negative like this, we call this an EPO dump. What always happens is that EPO just dumps the cold air right into the center part of the country, and then it starts to bleed south into the east over time. And look at this. This is suggesting for us that we bottom out here. -3 on the green line is the mean. The gray shades are where your 25 to 75th percentile of the individual 50 perturbed members show. So regardless here, we stay negative and firmly in the negative. Look at this. This is the 11th of March all the way out here. We're talking what could be a very cold February for much of the nation then as a result of that, extending maybe even into the first part of March. If you're looking for an early spring, I can just tell you it ain't going to come. All right. The early spring is just not going to come with this. If we go back and we take a look at the MGO forecasts, you can see as we look on the Wheeler plots here that essentially what you have is this going sort of full circle. We're in phase 5 right now. Phase 5 is very much a warm phase. We go very quickly through the phase 6 and into phase 7 and even into phase 8. And, there are indications as you get later on down in time here that you even go into phase 1. And as strong as this is, it's probably going to go into 2. If we take a look at what those phases correlate to as a result of that, remember we're in phase 5 right now. That's a very warm phase for us. Phase 6 is a fairly warm phase as well. But 7, what you see is the cold is starting to bleed out here into the center portion of the country. And then watch what happens as you round that out. You're starting to make that cold start to bleed south and east. And that's that negative EPO dump that I'm talking about. Phase 1 is a very cold, and phase 2 is a very cold phase for us as well. Well, if you go back and you take a look on the time for this, you start to get into phase 7 here about the 6th, 7th or so of February. And then by the time you're about the 15th, 16th onward, that's when you're getting into phase 8 and beyond with that. Well, if we go back here and we look at the heights and we say, here's this cold air dumping into the center part of the country. Well, look what that looks like. You've got ridging here off to the east. You've got the cold air dumping into here. Go back to here, and does it not look like a phase 7? And that's exactly what phase 7 should be on the MJO at the time. So good support in the models based on what the indices are doing, that the idea that the Euro has here is certainly right. And if that's the case, we've got some very much cold air that's going to eventually bleed to the south and east then as a result of that. How far to the south and east are we talking about here? How cold could it get? Well, we're not talking about 20 below zero like you're seeing up in here, but as we pull this out in time, this is certainly some bitterly cold air here. And what you'll see here with these in the teens below zero in the plains, eventually that's all going to start to bleed out to the south and the east. And now that doesn't necessarily mean the entire country is going to below zero. It'll moderate as it starts to go southward, but you've got some very frigid air that's going to come through here. And so temperatures in the single digits and teens, very likely for a good chunk of the country. Again, bottom line, as we go through later on into February, we're probably going to face some extremely cold weather, again, as a result of that. So if we take a look at our temperature outlooks then over the next 3 weeks then, if we're looking from today through next Thursday, we start to above normal, certainly out here to the west again. You'll see those below normal temperatures start to come here into the northern tier of the country. And after that, then again, you start to see those bleed south and east as we go over the next few weeks as a result of that. Anything in green here being in the equal chances. It certainly could be colder than that I've positioned on these outlooks. I've been pretty conservative at this point, but I would not be surprised to see these go little bit colder as we go forward in time. And then if we take a look beyond that, as far as what we could be looking at storms, then as a result of that, I think we've got plenty to work with as we come through into the first part of February. At least we've got the system coming in here around the 1st and the 2nd. We get another one, a Clipper system, a couple of days later, following on its heels around the 5th or 6th. And then we've got another system right around the 9th to the 12th, which could be a pretty sizable system as well. And that only takes you through the first 10 or 12 days of February, and beyond that I think we've got some things to work with. So an active pattern shaping up, a cold pattern shaping up as well. If you're looking for an early spring, well folks, keep on looking. I don't think it's going to happen this year. Again, be sure to click subscribe on YouTube, click that bell so that you can get notifications, and be sure to follow me on Facebook and Twitter at WillHiteWX. On Twitter, I'm meteorologist Michael Willhite. Have a great day and keep it tuned here as we get closer to time for more coverage on the coming winter storm.